Michael Sukkar is a man who is in the shadow cabinet, would hope to be part of Peter Dutton's government. Part of his responsibility has been expertise in and around housing, but also as the leader of opposition business in the parliament, meaning he's right there at the coalface of the fight. And he too has been sitting back watching the details of what we have been telling you tonight about how the distraction might be, you know, look at this giveaway, but the reality is the federal budget compared to 20 years ago, wildly out of control.
Well, Paul, it's a pretty stark set of numbers, and I think it highlights what most Australians instinctively know, and that is that if government brings in more money, they'll find new and inventive ways of spending it. I mean, this government over 3 years has increased spending by nearly $400 billion. Meanwhile, they've been receiving windfall gains from industries they tried to close down, like iron ore, like coal exports. So if the money flows into the government, I think Australians have worked out that those governments will work out ways of spending that money, and particularly Labor governments have been hopeless at it. This will be the fourth budget from this Albanese government. We've seen its spending massively increase year on year. We saw our inflation remaining higher for longer, partly, according to most economists, partly because of that elevated spending from this government. And subsequently, 3 years after the election of the Albanese government, I'd say, Paul, the vast majority of your viewers and the vast majority of Australians, hand on heart, will say that they're poorer today than they were 3 years ago.
Well, and demonstrably so. I mean, take your pick, right? If you're trying to pay off a house, it's tens of thousands of dollars more that you've had to pay under this mob because of interest rates going up as high as they did for as long as they did. If you're putting petrol in the car, 50 cents of every dollar that goes in goes off to the government. If you like to drink a bottle of Bundy rum every now and then, 63% of that bottle is taxed now. Now, the government tries to turn around and said, oh, we deserve a gold star because we're going to give you $25 a month back off your power bills. But of course, the power bill has already demonstrably gone up. But there's this little game that's being played, and it's one for people like you and me and everyone watching who's paying attention here, which is that, yes, they pay the power company $25 a month to bring that number down, but that then feeds into inflation, which they say has down by, you know, half a point as a result. So put simply, the only reason they're able to keep inflation at a level that the Reserve Bank wouldn't keep putting up interest rates is because they're using taxpayers' money to try to handbrake just how fast this car's going down the hill.
Yeah, look, these handouts are an admission of failure. I mean, this government came to office on a lie, saying that they would reduce people's power prices by $275. Most Australians will, on average, have seen a $1,000 increase, so they're way out on that. And now their policy seems to be, we'll take $10 out of one pocket and we'll give you $5 to put in the other pocket, because that's essentially what's happening. They tax Australians with one hand and give a little bit back with the other, and they want a pat on the back on the eve of an election. I think this government's got a plan for the next 5 weeks. I don't think they've got a plan for the next 5 years. We know that they didn't want to do this budget. They didn't want to hand this budget down, so they've been forced into this position, presumably because the budget, I think, will highlight, again, the points you're making, Paul, but also the reflection from most Australians that taking all the politics out of it, after 3 years of the Albanese government, they are worse off. And it doesn't matter what sort of spin you throw on it. People know if they're worse off. They know if they've gone backwards. And sadly, they know if they're poorer. And that's the case here. And no amount of so-called giveaways from this government, I think, is going to hide that fact that Australians know is the case.
Now, last one here, and it's a very big issue that we could do an hour on, so forgive me running into a couple of minutes, but it is housing. It's an area you've had focus and expertise in for a long time. There are people at this election who are willing to vote for parties they've never voted before if they think it's a way of opening the door towards their kids or grandkids being able to buy a house. By the time we get to an election, will there be a very clear, absolute offering from the Liberal Party as to how you will help the next generation get into a home?
Absolutely, Paul. I can tell you right now that if you're a younger Australian or even not so young Australian who wants to have a realistic prospect of owning a home one day, on election day you will inevitably vote for the coalition. We are going to, not only what we've announced to date with allowing people to access a portion of their super to help them bridge that deposit hurdle, bringing forward 500,000 new homes through funding the critical infrastructure that gets housing projects going, banning foreign residents and temporary residents from buying established property, reducing migration. On top of all of that, I can assure you, Paul, we will have a significant housing package that will be so stark that anyone who falls in the category you described will inevitably vote for the coalition, because in essence, in the marrow of our bones, Paul, we want young Australians to have that realistic prospect of owning a home, just like their parents and grandparents had. Labor's waved the white flag on that. Labor in the last 3 years, you could barely hear the words first home buyers come out of their mouths. They don't talk about first home buyers. So I'm very confident that that group you described, Paul, are going to fall in very strongly behind the coalition. And I say that with excitement and confidence with what is to be announced and what we have announced to date.